Thanks everyone for joining here. I know there's still a few people signing on, which is great. My name is Josh Tewksbury. I'm with Future Earth, and I'm happy to co-host with my collaborators here the first partnership for Resilience and Preparedness PREPdata webinar. And I wanted to welcome everyone to the call and just give just a very brief overview of what we're trying to do here today, and then pass it over to Loretta Burke, who will give a much deeper explanation about both the partnership, that is the Partnership for Resilience and Preparedness, and the platform that is PREPdata, which we're giving this webinar focused on. So thanks everyone for joining. A very quick overview of what to expect from this webinar is we want to first just provide that overview of the PREP partnership, and then go into some detail into a demonstration of what the platform, the PREPdata platform, can do currently, where we want it to go, and what we want to examine, what we're hoping to accomplish using this platform with collaborators around the world, and then dive a little bit more deeply into example applications, and then from there hold a Q&A session near the end. And I just want to point out that much of this is going to be run by Loretta Burke, who's at World Resources Institute, who's been they've been the engine of driving this forward in many ways. We'll talk more about that partnership, and Emily Nilsson will be doing the actual the demonstration project, or the demonstration of the platform. And we also have on the line with us Laura Sakowski and Francis Gassert, who will be both assisting in fielding questions and have deep knowledge of both the development of the platform, the engagement with different groups, and the capacities we have currently online. So I want to I think that's all I have for a welcome and a brief introduction. I thought maybe I'd pass this over to Loretta at this point, and she can take you through where we are currently with both the partnership and with the platform.
Thanks a lot, Josh. One thing I wanted to point out to the participants in this webinar is that you can type in questions at any point, and we will field them and answer as many as we can during the webinar and answer the rest after the webinar. I'd like to begin by saying a few words, and I mean that literally. I'm going to start with two words that are part of the partnership name: resilience and preparedness. When this partnership came together, we didn't want to talk about disasters and hazards. We chose positive words: preparedness, readiness for current and future climate, and resilience, an ability to bounce back after a damaging event. But in sharing two more words, I do want to point out that our focus is climate, preparing for current and future climate. And I will frequently use the word adaptation and refer to adaptation practitioners. So adaptation is the process of taking action to improve preparedness, to increase resilience. Next slide, please. There's a major challenge that we're trying to address with the PREP partnership and the PREPdata platform. That is, I'm sure many of you are familiar that the resilience space is quite complicated. There are a multitude of platforms that provide data, not always in very accessible ways. There's a multitude of tools. So it can be quite confusing to figure out where to start, what tool to use, how to get the data. We're finding these platforms are often fragmented. They don't converse well with one another. It's not easy to move data from one platform to a given tool. Some would call that lack of interoperability. Climate data sets are quite large, mammoth sometimes. They could be hourly precipitation data for the last 100 years. This is not an easy data set to slice up, but many have contributed a lot to simplifying those mammoth data sets and trying to make them more accessible. PREPdata tries to add value to those efforts by making them easily visualized by anyone using this platform. Another problem that we've seen is there's not a lot of feedback between data providers and many of the users of data who are trying to do adaptation and resilience planning. So we think PREP provides a useful feedback mechanism in that space. The other issue which complicates this work is the many different types of data that are needed. Information on climate hazards, information on the distribution of resources, population, built assets, and also social and economic factors which affect the vulnerability of a location. So there are many challenges working in this space. Next slide, please. Although PREP strives to be a user-focused and demand-driven partnership and platform, in fact, the partnership began in more of a supply-driven sense. PREP began in September of 2016. It was launched, and it came out of the Barack Obama White House. It responded to awareness that many federal agencies who are large providers of climate data, that includes NASA and NOAA, among other federal agencies, found that they're producing lots of data, they're serving it up and providing it to the public in a variety of ways, but much of the data was underutilized. So at its earliest stages, PREP was very much focused on giving better access to data sets, climate data sets produced by federal agencies. And let's move on to the next. Thanks. So PREP has two main components. When we talk about PREP, we're usually referring to the partnership itself. PREPdata is the platform. We're trying to address this. We're trying to address the difficulties in accessing data. So PREP is a platform that pulls together data from many different resources and allows visualization in a single platform and allows users to access data through this single platform. The partnership supports the adaptation planning community by providing data, technology, and technical expertise. It serves a networking and facilitation role in the climate change and adaptation planning ecosystem. It solicits information on user needs, what barriers adaptation practitioners are running into, what data they most want to use and can't access, and what other limitations they run into. We're working to improve interoperability across different data products and platforms. Next slide, please. The PREP partnership currently has 33 members. There are 6 public sector partners. 3 of them are federal agencies, those being NOAA, NASA, and US Department of Interior. Also the US Global Change Research Program. In addition, Sonoma County in California is a member, as is the European-based GEO, or Group on Earth Observations. We have 12 NGO partners. These tend to be research institutions or networks of adaptation professionals. In the private sector, we have 15 partners. These are a mix of technology companies, but also consulting firms that work on adaptation planning. The PREP partnership is coordinated by 2 NGOs, World Resources Institute and Future Earth, and the US Global Change Research Program. Next slide, please. In developing PREPdata, we have been thinking in terms of three key audiences. One is science translators and analysts, or I sometimes call them adaptation practitioners. So these are people that are seeking data and tools to do vulnerability assessments and risk assessments for particular locations and create management reports that others can use. The second category of audience are the data developers and innovators, those who are producing climate data sets or leveraging those products to make them more accessible to the public. Here, we think we provide a valuable feedback loop on what the general audience is asking for and what type of improvements they could make. The third audience are the users of the outputs of those reports. These are often decision makers and policy experts. So here it's making use of information in a more summarized and accessible form. Next slide, please. There are many things that we think make the PREPdata platform unique. It has a specific focus on climate resilience, including data on climate hazards, but also data on people and infrastructure and socioeconomic variables. It is a very visual, intuitive, map-based platform. We've developed it in a way that we hope is suitable both for novice and more experienced users. We have engaged in active curation of both data sets and tools. We're trying to not overwhelm users with information, with data and tools, but rather respond to the key needs. The curation to date has been based upon an extensive user needs assessment and data prioritization surveys that were conducted last spring and summer. But going forward, now that the platform was launched just a month and a half ago.
So thank you very much, Loretta, for that great introduction to PREP, the partnership, and to PREPdata. So we've been mentioning PREPdata a lot, and what exactly is it? Well, as Loretta mentioned, it is a very visual, map-based, open data platform where users can discover, interact with, and create custom content using a variety of climate, socioeconomic, and physical data sets from authoritative sources. So for the next part of this webinar, I will be going through several demonstrations of the platform with the intention of enabling you all on this call, and for those who watch the recording after, to give you the tools that you need to be able to immediately start using PREPdata. So to do things like interacting with the data sets on the platform, to be able to create and share custom graphs and charts, and to be able to make your own dashboards. So this training will provide you with the tools you need to be able to immediately start using PREPdata.org right after this. So I can start by going through our website, PREPdata.org. So as you scroll through, you can see all the different parts of the site and link to the different sections of it, read some more about the partnership and see, as Loretta mentioned, all the partners involved, and you can send us a message there too. Now the main part of the site, which is the data discovery section, is called Explore. And this is the map-based part of the platform where you can discover different data sets. Now we've got core data sets here. And then in the all data sets section, this is where we have the entire list of all the data sets available on the platform. These can be filtered by geography or topic. So for example, if we want to look at data sets specific to the United States, we could select that and then add an additional topic like disaster. And the resulting list of data sets that appears are those that meet those two criteria. So we have that list of data sets that deal with the US and that deal with disaster as a topic that you can see there. In addition to filtering and parsing through all these data sets, you can also enter in a search term. So say we want to look at what data sets PREP has for population. You can type that in as a search term and those relevant data sets come up. But one thing we want to reiterate to everyone today is that this is an initial set of data that we have available on the platform, and we really want your input from climate adaptation and resilience practitioners to hear what data would be most useful to you. So we have a suggest dataset button that brings you to a data request form that you can fill out your email address and just answer a few questions on the type of data that you need in your work to make your analysis and data visualization more useful. So back to the core dataset side, which has a curated list of datasets. We have global datasets, but also US-specific datasets. So this was the first geography that we had a focus on. So if we scroll down to people, we can look at datasets on a global level that deal with people and population. So you can zoom into the dataset, zoom out, and then if we scroll up to the top, you can see related datasets in these topics and those if we have any specific to the United States, which we do here, these population projections from the EPA. Now you can turn datasets on and off using the little toggle off to the left-hand side next to the dataset. And for each of these, you can see the legend appearing in the top right-hand corner, telling you what each color in that legend means. And there's a variety of buttons on there. If you click Zoom to Bounds, it brings you to the ideal layer extent for that dataset. And if you zoom into a particular area, you can zoom right back out using that Zoom to Bounds button. Now there's an opacity slider as well, and you can drag that little circle back and forth along the slider to change the opacity of the layer, which is really, really useful when you're overlaying a number of different data sets to be able to see all the underlying data in those different layers. If a data set has multiple layers like this one, you can click that button to see which layers are viewable on the platform. So we're looking at 2010 population, but we also have projections for 2100 and 2050, and you can select that layer to be able to see it appear on the map. You can toggle visibility using the I button on the legend, which is again also helpful when you're looking at multiple different data sets to be able to easily toggle them on and off. And to get rid of it off the map, you just hit close. Now there is one more button on here that's notable that I want to mention, which is the letter I button. And that is the information button that pops out a sidebar with information about the data set that you're currently looking at. So we've got the source, we have a description. So without even leaving Explore, you can get a lot more information about the data set that you're viewing. And if you click the Learn More link, you're brought to what we're calling the dataset detail page, which has the metadata for the data set. So we've got the source title, and we have that same description that you saw on the sidebar pop out. And then if you scroll all the way down past the customized visualization tool, which I will demonstrate later, you can see all the rest of the metadata down at the bottom of the page. So one of the things on here is the download from original source link. On PREP, we're only making visible some of the parts and some of the aspects of the data sets that we're showing on the platform, but you can access the entire data set for download at the source, and we provide the link right there, along with all these other different metadata fields, so you can get a sense of exactly what you're looking at. Now, back on Explore, I can show you a few other things that you can do to kind of customize your viewing experience. So if you turn on this global population density data set again, zoom out to a global extent, down in the bottom right-hand corner, you have the option to show a variety of base maps. So we're on the default right now, but there's also options for dark and for light, and also for satellite and terrain. So all of these data sets visualize in different ways, and you have the ability to customize the base map to be able to have the data set viewed in the best way. So like a dark base map looks good for this data set. And then you can also add labels. So we have options for dark and light labels. And again, depending on what the data set looks like, you can use those different options. And we also have different boundaries. So these are just administrative boundaries that you can easily add. And if you zoom in, they'll actually change to the next layer of administrative boundaries. We've got a geographic search function as well. So if you type in an area you're interested in, and I'm in Washington, D.C. right now, so if we type that in, it immediately brings you to that point on the map. Now, this is how you can interact with the majority of the data sets on PREPdata, but there are some data sets, specifically those dealing with different climate variables and indicators, that have a slightly different interface. So I'll show an example with that right now. This is looking at cumulative precipitation, some downscale climate data from the NASA Next GDP downscaling method, and you can see that it has data over both landforms and ocean. If you select one of the ocean masks, you get the data clipped out to the landforms really neatly along that line. And there's options there for dark and for light. Now, as a user, you can choose whether this is useful for you. I mean, if you're looking at coastal indicators, you may want to see how these different climate indicators are performing on the coastline. So as a user, you can decide whether that is useful to you. And there's a slightly different legend for these climate indicators. You can pick the time period you're interested in looking at. You can pick a different temporal resolution, and you can pick between two emission scenarios, either low emissions or high emissions, corresponding to RCP 4.5 and 8.5. And you can see that layer automatically and dynamically update on the map as you're making those changes and changing those parameters. Now that was Explore, which is one of the big sections of the site, but we also have dashboards. Now dashboards are a compilation of pages that focus on specific communities or specific topics, and they're a collection of indicators, so all these different data sets that can be visualized in different ways, and you can link up stories and tools and compile a lot of different resources and content on these dashboards. So here's an example of what we call a widget. So we've got projected increases in monthly minimum winter air temperature. You can scroll through the different time periods and see that automatically and dynamically update. If we look at some other temperature widgets, we've got these little charts and graphs right here that you can scroll over, and you can see the labels for those specific values for the points show up. So this is just a collection of data sets that have been visualized that a community can put together for the indicators that they're most interested in. And these can also hold stories and tools. So if a community has an assortment of tools that they want to link to, you can provide easy access, and clicking on the title brings you right to that external resource. So that is one type of dashboard. And then this one is for Sonoma County, which has a great dashboard on here. And we also developed a sample dashboard for the webinar looking at landslides in Western South America. Now through this webinar, I'll be showing how to create this step by step. So you'll all have the tools available to you to be able to replicate this dashboard if you so choose, or to use it kind of as an example for a dashboard that you can create for your own community or for an area that you're interested in. So we've got these map widgets, and you can see they're dynamic. You can zoom in and out. You can see the legend. You can bring in information on population density and landslides like we have here. You can upload your own data sets and create these different widgets. So these are bar charts and pie charts. And you can create and pull in external images or images that you upload yourself. You can embed different types of content too. Like this is one of those climate indicators that I was showing before. You can create an embeddable function for that and put that right into your widget that users will be able to interact with. And you can have these similar charts and graphs. So that is another type of dashboard that, again, I'll be walking through how to make that step by step later on in the webinar. So those are dashboards. Another component of those is the ability to share dashboards. So there's a button right at the top, and you can either share using the link, or using the embed code. So you have this iframe code that can be pasted directly into the HTML for a web page. So you can use this as a communication tool and immediately share it upon creation. Now, stories are the more narrative element of the platform. So these are stories about communities or topics that have take a more narrative approach and are the storytelling element of PREPdata. So this is an example of an Esri story map. So many of our stories on the platform now are embedded Esri story maps, which can be very easily embedded directly into the platform. And as I'm sure many of you on the call are familiar with Esri story maps, you can scroll through, zoom into certain areas, and just get this narrative approach to looking at and exploring these different climate adaptation stories. So that was an example with a story map, but they can also take other forms. So this is an example looking at Ethiopia, climate and agriculture. If you look through that, you can see different images and data, embeddable functions, all compiled onto the story, looking at certain case studies for an area and for a specific topic. Now, the next part of the site is resources. And as Loretta mentioned, I mean, this is one platform in a myriad of different tools and platforms and resources available for climate adaptation and resilience practitioners. And we want to provide users with links to be able to use these other resources to complement their use on PREP and to provide them with other information. So each of those resources provides a link which brings you directly to that external source. And this is a curated list put into these different categories that you can browse through for some additional information. Now, in order to start making your own content and creating dashboards and creating those widgets, you can make a MyPrep account by logging in with your Facebook, Google, or Twitter accounts. I'll show an example logging in through Facebook. And you just click that button there and you use the same credentials to log in through Facebook and you're brought into your MyPrep account. So in MyPrep, you have your profile, you have data sets, which is comprised of any data sets that you upload, can be any tabular data that you upload into this section. You have dashboards, so any dashboards that you create will show up here. You have any widgets that you create. I haven't made any yet, but I'll be showing you how to make some in just a minute. And you can also add areas of interest. Now this is if you want to have a certain focus on a certain area and be able to interact with the data and filter it to a certain area that you're most interested in. This could be a river basin, it could be a county, it could be any shape or area that you can either upload directly. You can pick one of those areas already on the list, or you can follow the instructions on the pop-up to go to this website and to draw out the area that you're most interested in. And you can save that as a zipped shapefile and upload it directly there to have accessible. But I'll just go through the steps of showing how to make one of those areas of interest. So say I want to zoom into central India. Now there's a variety of options on here to be able to draw, either some lines or to make a polygon, but just to keep it simple, we can just do a rectangle. So we'll draw a rectangle over central India, and you can see off to the right-hand side some coordinates pop up. And all we have to do is save it in the shapefile format. And it saves it as a zipped shapefile, which was one of the file types that was mentioned is supported by this feature. So we can just give it a title and save it. And if we go back to MyPrep, you can then find that file wherever you saved it and upload it there. So again, this can be shapefiles that you already have for either a river basin or an area that you're interested in, but we do have this option, and you can see right there, my little rectangle over India pops up. So that was a walkthrough through all the different parts of the PREPdata platform. Now, I've been talking a lot about interacting with the data that's already on PREP, but one of the big features of the site is the ability for users to upload their own data. So we'll show an example of that now. That was one of the main pieces of feedback that we got through the user needs assessment and through speaking with users, like Loretta had mentioned before. So to upload your own data, we can use an example from NASA's Global Landslide Catalog, which has data on landslide occurrences, looking at the type of trigger, the continent, the country it took place in, and if you export that, you can get just a regular CSV file, which is here. So browsing through that, you can see the different attributes of the data. You've got the trigger, the country, continent, etc. So you'd be able to upload this tabular data directly on MyPrep. Now, this is a data set that is already available in Explore, but just for the purposes of demonstration, I'll show you how you would go about uploading this. So if you go to the MyPrep section and you go to Datasets, you can just click on New Dataset, give it a title. So this one is landslides. And you can select the format of the data. So this is a CSV, but you can see the other formats that we allow upload for. And then it's just a matter of navigating to where it is saved on your computer, and dragging and dropping. And you have to give a few points of information to the platform to help it be able to read that CSV file. So you have to go through and find which of those columns on the data set relate to each of these different fields. So we've got latitude and longitude, so being able to tell the platform where it indicates location, and we've got date and country too. And looking at the table before, that was under a column called country name. Now at this point as well, we have that button to suggest data set. Now this is just having a point of entry for users that want to upload data, and if this is something that you think would be useful to other PREPdata users, you can go ahead and suggest it as a data set, which we will be reviewing on a regular basis. But you see up in the upper right-hand corner, you get that success green rectangle, and it's as easy as that. So all you have to do is find whatever data you're interested in uploading, and if it's in that tabular format, you can immediately upload it to the platform and then start interacting with it. And I've been talking about interacting with data sets a lot, so I'm going to show you exactly how that looks. Now, any data that you upload, you'd be able to create some of those bar charts and pie charts that I was showing before, but you can also do that with any of the data sets in Explore. So we'll go through an example. Now, I was mentioning that landslides data set that we were just looking at from NASA. And as I mentioned, it is currently on Explore, so I can just show you the interface to be able to create those custom charts and graphs from there. So if we go to the dataset detail page, which has all the metadata, we come to this customized visualization. And we've got different types of visualizations you can do here. So one is a table, and you can see that that is just the attribute table for the dataset. That is just the CSV that we were looking at on Microsoft Excel directly before. But we've also got a map option. So this would be a little map widget. You could zoom in to the area you're most interested in and save that extent. But we also have an option to make charts. And then you're brought to this Microsoft Excel pivot table type interface where you can just take the different column names from the data set and drag and drop them onto these different fields. And just like when you're making a pivot table, you have options to aggregate. So if you click on this little wheel, you can aggregate by count. And for this, I want to look at the number of landslides by country, but filter it to South America. So if I bring continent on to filter and click SA, I saw that in the data before, and you can see dynamically updating off to the right is that bar chart that shows up. Now they're a little haphazard now, so I want to order them by the number of landslides per country. And I can click to order them in descending order. And there we go. And it's as easy as that to interact with the data and make these own custom widgets to be able to derive the information that you're most interested in. You can type in a title and click Save Widget. And as long as you're logged into the site, you can save it there. So that was a bar chart, but let's go through and look at a pie chart as well. So this is the same data in pie chart form, but we can look at maybe a different component of it, and we can use that area intersection option here. So if I want to focus on Peru and maybe look at landslides categorized by, say, trigger. So there's trigger right there, and I can pull that over into category and value, and the chart will dynamically update off to the right. Do that aggregate count function, and there it is. We've got a pie chart looking specifically at Peru for landslides categorized by their trigger, and most of them are that medium blue color. So you can see that the majority of landslides have been triggered by downpours. Now in that area intersection, that's also where you would be able to use that custom area that you uploaded that I was showing in the last demo. Let's save that one again, and then it prompts me to check my widget. So let's go have a look, and this brings you to the My Prep section of the count in widgets, and you can see right there, those two little widgets that I just created show up right there. So one of the other features of the platform that we're particularly excited about is the surfacing of these big climate data sets. So climate data sets and downscaling statistical methods like the NASA Earth Exchange Global Daily Downscale Projections, NASA Next GDP, and LOCA, the Localized Constructed Analogs. So these are two huge sets of data that look at maximum temperature, minimum temperature, and precipitation. And from those three data points, derive a number of indicators. So using those 3 points of data, we derived 10 different indicators. So average temperature, cooling degree days, extreme heat, etc. And using those two different statistical downscaling methods, we use those to create projections for emission scenarios, RCP 4.5 and 8.5. So all of these data sets are available on the platform. And the Next GDP data is global, and LOCA is for the US. So each of these climate indicators on Explorer has a slightly different interface and a different way of interacting with the data and creating those widgets. So I'll go through and show an example of that now. So right from core data sets, we can see several of these climate indicators that were listed on that list. And if we scroll down to extreme precipitation days from the NASA Next GDP data set, we can have a look at that. Now, extreme precipitation days are defined as the average count of days with the precipitation greater than the 99th percentile of the baseline year. And if we go to the Learn More page, which has all the metadata, instead of that widget creator that I was demoing in the last slide, there is a different custom interface. Now, this is the same interface for all of the Next GDP indicators and all of the LOCA indicators as well. So through this, you can see that the data is a little flat right now, but if you can bring up a second time period to do comparisons. So you can choose a temporal resolution. You can pick two different time periods, in this case decades, to compare. And you can pick between two different scenarios after zooming into the area you're most interested in. So you can pick high emissions, for example. And in the middle, you've got this little slider that you can slide back and forth and see, looking at those two time periods. So off to the left, we've got 2011 to 2020, and off to the right, we have 2071 to 2080. And as you move that slider back and forth, you can see the data dynamically changing and to see how this indicator is going to be projected to change in the future based on this emission scenario. You can do that by using the little slider, or you can also toggle back and forth between the two layers. And another option is to look at the calculated difference between those two time periods for that emission scenario for that indicator. And you can see all along Western South America and the Andes that extreme precipitation days are projected to increase. You have the same functionality that you do in Explorer, adding layers, adding labels and masking out the ocean, but you can also drop a point anywhere on the map. So let's drop it right outside of Cusco. And if you drop that point right there, a chart is automatically generated querying the 12 terabyte data set and automatically generating an on-the-fly analysis for that specific point. So the blue dotted line shows the average number of extreme precipitation days over time using those 21 climate models. And the gray shows the range of projections between the 25th and 75th percentile. And you can see there the two yellow vertical lines showing those two time periods that you had selected as parameters at the top. Now, you can do this for any of those 10 indicators that I had mentioned, and you can have the same functionality to be able to drop a point anywhere. So you can immediately share these. So for that little map one, you can use an embed link, and you can copy that iframe code. Right now, I'm just going to copy that URL, and I'm going to be actually using this to make a widget later to be able to embed this entire thing into a dashboard. So I'm going to copy that URL. And on the chart, you can use those little share buttons at the bottom to be able to save the widget directly to my prep, just like we were doing with those little map and chart widgets that I was showing before. So if we just give it a title, extreme precipitation in Cusco, Peru, and we save it, it's saved to my prep. So next, and this is the last of the platform demos, but this is going to be the one that really brings everything together and shows you how to make a dashboard. So to use some of those widgets that I've been creating throughout this, and to show you how to add different types of content onto a dashboard that you yourself can make right after. And this was something that really came out in the user needs assessment that we did and interaction with users for the ability for PREPdata users to be able to author their own dashboards. So using this sample dashboard, I'll walk through now how you can go about making this. Now this is looking at a particular point location of interest and for particular indicators of interest, looking at who might be affected by landslides, where landslides occur. And you can see those familiar to widgets that I had created before, looking at extreme precipitation and how that is projected to change based on different scenarios. So this is, again, a place where you can bring all these different types of content available in one place to be able to tell some interesting stories. So from my prep, if I want to make a dashboard, I would normally go and click New Dashboard, but I did start a draft of this because it would have taken way too long to make the entire thing. So it started a draft that we can just go through those missing pieces and show you how to upload and add those different types of content. So you give it a name and give it a summary, and then you can immediately start adding content by clicking Add. So you can add text, you can add images, videos, you can add embeds, you can separate it into 2 or 3 columns, and you can add widgets and tools and connect up stories as well. So you can add content from the platform or from external sources. So here's some text that I copied in. You can see how you can change the format of the text. So do different sizes and bold and italicize, and you can add hyperlinks to it. And you can also add these little map widgets. So right now I've got this probabilities of urban expansion, but on that example dashboard, we had global population density. So we're going to have to go back to Explore and make that little map widget, which I can show you now. So let's save the changes so far for that text that we added, and then go back up to Explore and find that data set and make a widget out of it so we can add it to the dashboard. So it was gridded population density, which we have here. We can scroll down to that widget creator. It's already set on map, and we can see that it's looking at world population density in 2015. So we can just zoom in to the area that we want to focus on, which is the area in Western South America. This is around Peru. Zoom in to the area, and just like the other widgets that we were creating, those bar and pie charts, you can just give it a title and save it, and it's immediately saved to my prep. So add that here, and you can click Save, and then we can go back and continue making that dashboard. So go back to My Prep and pick up where we left off with that dashboard creation. So it's the landslides dashboard. And then we scroll up to that missing piece, and if we click Add and we select Widget, you can see that first one right there, population density, which is the one that I had just made. So we can click on that and have that added, and there you go. There's a little map widget that you can add, and that is how you would do that for any of the data sets that you find on Explore that you'd be interested in adding to a dashboard. Now, we were interacting with that NASA Global Landslide Catalog dataset before, and we made that bar chart and that pie chart. So those would be interesting to add to this dashboard as well. So similarly, you can go and scroll over to the part that you want to add it to and select Add, and those were two widgets as well. So we can add 2 columns using this grid button. You've either got 2 or 3 or just a full width. But if you click Add, you can go to Widget and you can find those 2 widgets that we had made before. So the first one was landslides in South America, which is right there. And that nice little bar chart appears. And then the other one was that pie chart that we had made looking at landslides by trigger for Peru. And I've got that one shown right there. So again, this type of interaction you can have with data sets that you upload yourself in tabular format or any of the vector or tabular data sets on Explore. You can also add external images. So we found some interesting images from NASA Earth Observatory looking at flooding as a result of heavy rains about this time last year in Peru. So we can add another grid and then find those images that we downloaded before and add them as images. Now these can be things you upload yourself. You can also add and embed videos. You can add multiple different types of content here. We can find where I saved those images, which is somewhere. There we go. So here's time period 1, and you can just add some alt text to it. So we'll just say Peru. And then we can find the second image in that same folder to show that comparison between the 2. So just add that one there, add some text as well. And then you can see those before and after images from NASA Earth Observatory looking at this lake in Peru and some extreme flooding as a result of very heavy rains. So this is all looking at the same type of topic and trying to compile several different indicators and pieces of content that are related. So remember I saved that URL from the next G2DP dataset. Well, this is where it comes in handy. So I'm going to copy that and I'm going to add that as an embed for this dashboard. So I can click that type of content, and right where it says source, I can paste that URL that I had saved before, and that was that map looking at the difference in extreme precipitation days for that region. And you'd have this embeddable widget right here, which when it's on a dashboard, users would be able to interact with it, be able to pick those different parameters, see the side-to-side difference. So all that functionality that I was showing before can be directly embedded into a dashboard. And the very last thing we're going to add was that line chart that was developed, dropping a point on Cusco for that extreme precipitation days data set. So again, we just add a widget. We can see that one right there, see the little preview of it, and then click on that, and you have all of the components of that dashboard, looking at all the different types of content that you can add, and you can click Save, and you immediately have a dashboard that you're able to preview, which we'll do right now. And you can see it pop up right here. And this is an exact replica of the dashboard that's available on PREPdata. So you can look at those nice map widgets that we had made, the bar and pie charts, the external images, and those NASA Next GDP climate indicators. And again, this can be shared directly, either by using a link or by embedding it with that iframe code into your own site. So that was a whole lot of demos showing you all the different features of the PREPdata platform. So just as a little overview, we covered the different parts of the site. So we've got Explore, which is the data discovery part. We have dashboards and stories. We've got a listing of curated resources and for the broader resilience ecosystem. And we've got My Prep, which is the user part of the site where you can upload and interact with data. We've got the ability to visualize data, and we have some of those really impressive climate data for those downscaled climate projections, and NASA Next GDP and LOCA. We allow users to be able to upload and interact with their own data and to be able to create dashboards. So with all of those demos, I'm going to turn it back over to Loretta to talk about how PREP is currently being applied. Can she unmute herself?
Muted. Okay, thank you. Emily, that was an excellent demo. Quite the tour of the many aspects of PREPdata. Thanks so much. I'm sure there'll be some additional questions, and I see lots of questions have been going back and forth via the chat box. That's great to see. So as Emily mentioned, we've got a good number of global data sets and US data sets. They're a starting point. This platform was only released 6 weeks ago. In a sense, we provided basic content to give people an idea of the possibilities on this platform. We couldn't upload everything under the sun, but it's a good starting point, and we welcome your feedback on additional data sets you'd like to see included, and also additional features that you'd like to see on PREPdata. So we started with US and global data sets, but as we have projects, or as our partners have projects, we'll be expanding content in those locations. One of our first pilot applications is in India, in 2 Indian states, in support of their state action plans on climate change. The 2 states are Uttarakhand in the north, edging on the Himalayas, and Madhya Pradesh in the center of the country. We'll be working with the climate centers in both states and other stakeholders to develop dashboards by sector for the sectors they're most interested in. And in Uttarakhand, it looks like it will be agriculture, tourism, and water. And in Madhya Pradesh, it's forestry, agriculture, and water. So there's not new content for India yet, but by May or June, there will be. We're also working with a PREP partner called START, an NGO focused on building capacity in Africa and Asia, on applications of PREP in Africa. And here, these will probably be regional scale applications with capacity building workshops and workshops to figure out what data they're having the most trouble accessing and how delivering data through this visualization platform can be most useful in each region. We're also working with partners in the Western US to explore how PREPdata can support adaptation planning in the private sector. Right now, we're exploring applications related to vineyards and ski areas, so those trips could be really fun. We look forward to additional ideas from users of the PREP platform on applications they'd like to do, dashboards they'd like to develop. We're happy to provide advice and provide support. So please share your ideas with us. Next slide, please. We have a very good number of attendees on this call. That's really great to see. And we hope this translates into many users of the PREPdata platform. So what we'd love for you to do is spend some time on the platform, explore it, use the different sections of PREPdata, provide feedback to us on additional data sets you'd like to see included, any errors you see on the platform, any additional features that you think would be desirable. We don't have the ability to respond to all requests. What we'll be doing over the next couple months is compiling this feedback, accumulating and deciding which data sets are the most desired and which features are of greatest interest going forward. Also, we would love to have more users develop dashboards. Emily has shown how easy it is to develop a dashboard. We're likely to develop some templates in the future to make it even easier, but at present, you can free-form develop a dashboard, design it to your interest, include the key indicators that are of interest for you and your location and your sector. Next slide, please. So this was our first webinar since PREPdata has been launched. It served as an overview, a brief overview of the partnership and an overview of current features on the platform. We're planning future webinars and trainings. We have not actually developed these yet, so you're very much in a position to influence what trainings we provide in the future. Please type comments and suggestions into the chat box now about what you'd like to see. With that, we're moving to question and answer period of this webinar. You can, by the way, provide comments through a variety of means. Like during the webinar, you can enter chat. You can send email to info@prepdata.org, and there are several buttons on the PREPdata website where you can make requests for additional data or other comments. I'll also mention that there'll be a survey given towards the end of this webinar. Could Laura or someone else mention how the survey becomes accessible?
Yes, thanks so much, Loretta, Emily, and Josh for those presentations. My name is Laura, and I coordinate the engagement of PREP. And so at the end of the webinar, you'll be sent a short survey, and this survey is designed to give us really good feedback so the platform remains user-driven. So it would be fantastic if you would take the time to fill that out. And then any questions we don't get to in this Q&A session, you can also enter those there, and we'll respond back on a one-by-one basis. So right now, if you have questions, please type them into the chat box, and it's been fantastic to respond to the questions as they've been coming in, some really great questions and feedback. So I think I'll first start it off with kind of a higher level question with, let's see, what is the growth and vision of the platform and PREP, and where does it make sense for users to engage? So Loretta, I'll turn that to you.
Sure, thanks, Laura. It's going to grow organically. We're early in the release, and thus far, our user community is fairly small. And I think prior to this webinar, people didn't have a good sense of how to use the platform. So we'll grow as our user base grows, and the technology will improve as we coalesce around ideas for improvement. I think the PREPdata platform is a good starting point. It won't offer all of the features. It won't cover all of the data types that you want, but it's a base. And being so new after platform launch, we're in a phase right now where we're just trying to make sure everything that we're currently offering works well. That's our main focus. In the coming months, we'll be consolidating recommendations and trying to address those. And of course, we will be constrained by time and resources. And so we'll be prioritizing and also fundraising to do additional features on the PREPdata platform. So it's organic. The more demand there is for the platform, the more we can show its usefulness, and the more we'll be in a better position to expand content and expand functionality.
Thanks, Loretta. Another question that we're getting around is templates and creating templates for dashboards. And there's been some suggestion for this and also questions around this. So Emily, I'll ask you, are there plans to create templates or create an easy entry point for communities to create dashboards?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. So that is something that has certainly been on our radar over the past few months as we've been developing this platform, and template dashboards are an excellent idea. We want to make it easy for users to be able to see an example dashboard and to be able to specify that for their location. So we're looking at creating template dashboards for a variety of climate resilience hazards and looking at different climate indicators that would be of most interest to certain communities, and be able to use that as a starting point where a user would ideally just be able to put in their location and have those data sets be made specific to that region. So that is something that is certainly on our radar that we're going to be working on over the coming months. And it would be great also to hear from whoever was asking about those and inquiring to hear what types of templates would be most useful for you. Are you focused on agriculture? So would a template dashboard on agriculture be particularly interesting? Or would one on coastal resilience be really interesting? So if we can get some ideas from you with what you're most interested in, that will really help us with the development of these. And as Loretta said, we're going to be compiling all these different ideas and suggestions and be working on those as we can in the future.
Great. So another question on dashboards for you, Emily, is when a dashboard is uploaded and created by a community, who maintains it once it's uploaded on PREP? And then is it possible to publish it on PREP, or does the dashboard stay private?
Certainly, good question. So the default right now is that any user created dashboards are private. But if a user community is interested in having that dashboard be public facing, then that is something that we can definitely discuss on a one-on-one basis and have that dashboard published for other PREPdata users. For the maintenance of it, I need to think a little bit more about that. Users who create it should have full control over updating and maintaining that dashboard. So would be able to work with you to be able to keep that up to date over time.
Great, thanks. So Francis, I'm going to ask this question to you, and Francis leads the technical working group of PREP. And this question comes from Emily, and she's impressed with the speed of the query for extreme precipitation days. So we said the underlying data is 12 TB and querying on the fly. Is that data hosted by you or accessed from an external service?
That's a good question. For the next TDDP data, we did compute some intermediate products so that the queries would be faster. However, that means that we can't do all of the queries that are possible against the data set, which is quite huge. But there is a great tool that one of our partners developed, Azavia, the Azavia Climate API, which lets you do more complex queries against the entire data set.
Great. And then this next question, Francis or Loretta, you could take it. It appears the PREP platform is closely tied to Esri services. Is this the case?
That's also a good question. Esri is a core partner on PREP and has been very supportive of our work over time. But the platform itself is an open source platform that ties together many different technologies, including Esri technologies, as well as Google Earth Engine, Cardo, and several others. It's actually built on an open source project that WRI is developing called Resource Watch.
Thanks. And Loretta, this question is for you. So we're getting several questions about are certain data sets available, and in the future, will other RCPs be available to visualize? So could you talk a little bit to the data prioritization effort and how we update data as we get requests?
Sure. As I think I mentioned at the start, one of the things we were trying to do is make it easy for both new and experienced users to find data. So we didn't want to overwhelm them with too many data sets. We tried to streamline that, at least as our starting point. And because so many adaptation and vulnerability assessments I've seen tend to use RCP 4.5 and 8.5, we decided to focus on those. This is, of course, something that came out of consultation with the wider partnership. That's our starting point. And we welcome feedback on other things people would want to see. We'll be consolidating feedback. People can vote on other people's comments. So we'll be responsive to what are the most popular requests.
And I can add something to that too. So that data request form, we're going to be checking that on a regular basis. And even if the data doesn't currently exist, as Loretta mentioned in one of the intro slides, one of the notable things about PREP and the partnership is enabling feedback mechanisms. So there are a number of data providers that we're partnered with and have access to. So we're in a good position to be able to provide feedback to them that this is the type of data that is being requested by users and that is necessary for their climate and adaptation resilience planning. So we've got that feedback in there as well.
Great, thank you. So we have another question. Is it possible to save dashboards as PDFs or any other formats? Also, will one be able to save plots onto their local machines? So Francis or Emily?
Yeah, so dashboards can be printed. So you can just, as you would any normal web page, you can just save it as a PDF from that or print it to a PDF from that. And you can also save as PDFs any of those widgets that I was showing how to create. And Laura, could I have you repeat that second question?
Yes. So, sorry, I lost the, I think it was about if you can save plots to your local machine. So can you save an area of data? So for example, if someone is interested in area data over Turkey, could you just isolate that data and save it?
Got it. Okay. So that isn't possible on PREP itself, but on the metadata pages for each of those data sets, we provide the link that you can go directly to the source and download the data set, at which point you'd be able to interact with it on a more comprehensive basis and be able to do that type of analysis and parsing down of data.
Great. So a question to Francis or Emily, how can I cite any products from PREP in report or articles? How to cite any products from PREP and, oh, sorry, it's repeated.
We would recommend that you cite the original source of the data for any products that you get from PREP. However, it would also be nice if you noted that you receive the data through PREP. Most of, or all of the data sets should have a suggested citation in their metadata page that we suggest you follow.
Thanks. So Emily, is there a better way to view multiple layers? For example, if I want to overlay world population density with flood risk to quickly see where the highest risk / most densely populated areas are, it's not easy to compare. Is adjusting opacity the only option, or is there a way to somehow combine layers?
So on PREP itself, it doesn't, adjusting the opacity would be the only way to be able to do that, and toggling the layers on and off. I mean, that's just an issue that is inherent with, especially raster data, that they can be complex to overlay, but being able to adjust the opacity of different layers and change the order that they appear will allow you to do some of that visual analysis.
Beyond that, we recommend that you go and download the data and conduct your own analysis on the desktop. We didn't want to rebuild some of the excellent tools that our partners have built for doing GIS analysis. And there are plenty of tools that are out there. Once you have the data, you can do whatever overlay you'd like.
Great. So Loretta, this question is for you. Are there plans to add impacts from using PREP data to management outcomes? So do we plan on analyzing how PREP data is being used by communities or decision makers and communicating that?
Yes, and we'll be doing a number of things once there's a larger community on PREP data. One is, just tracking analytics of use, but also looking at the different dashboards that are created, the different stories that are added, and doing that with the intention of, if there's interest, establishing communities of practice. So groups that are interested in a given topic that do want to interact and try to combine forces to achieve ends. Was there another part to that question, Laura?
That was the question.
Okay. Thanks.
So here's a question around data privacy and data openness. So if I have to plug in our locations into PREP, what data privacy control exist? So Francis or Emily?
So any data sets that a user uploads are retained within your section of the website, so they aren't accessible by anyone other than administrators. And there's only a handful of us in this core team that are admins for the whole site, so we would have access to that, but it's just a small number of people. So any data that you put in is yours and will not be accessible by anyone else.
Thank you. So Loretta, this is a higher level question for you. What's the long-term vision for keeping PREP organized and healthy? We'll start with that one.
I would love to hear the who part as well. A strategic plan. The partnership just last fall and early into this year developed a strategic plan. Now we're working on a sustainable financing strategy. So, vision, staff, and funding are the important parts of maintaining the platform, but also applying a fair bit of common sense. So we're organic, we're adaptive. We have put forward what we think is the appropriate platform, given resource constraints and given the user needs assessment and data prioritization that occurred last year. So this is our stepping off point. And we have a vision for a platform that is widely used, that grows in response to user input. So we're at an early and flexible point. I'll stop with that.
Okay.
And the
And
second question?
yeah, the follow-up question to that is, what do the short and long-term funding strategies look like?
I can share that. It's easier to share via email if somebody's interested in the details of that. I'll also mention, I don't think we said this earlier, we currently have 33 members in the partnership, and we are open to new members. So if people are really eager to get involved in this exciting initiative, we welcome that. People can participate in the engagement working group or on technical aspects of PREP development or on overall vision for how to take it forward. This partnership very much benefits from wide participation from members of the adaptation community, and it's often members that lead partnership organizations, networks of adaptation practitioners. So we solicit input widely from those sources, and they are US and international sources, and of course from data providers. So that's a bit on how we gather information and decide how to go forward. In terms of a financing strategy, we're currently looking both at support from foundations, support from some partnerships that are focused on private sector, and also looking at some bilateral funding sources.
Great. So a really important question is, what is the best way in which we can offer suggestions?
Great, so there's several different ways of doing that. On the PREPdata.org site itself, you'll see off on the right-hand side of the page, there's a little smiley face. And if you hover over that, a button for feedback pops out. And then that is a place that you can either report things that are not working or add suggestions for new features or functionality that you think would be really useful for such a platform. And that is done in a style where you can also vote up any other suggestions that other users make on there. So you can see that list of things that people have currently suggested, and maybe that will generate some additional ideas. We would also love input. We've got our email on the screen right now. It's info@prepdata.org, which we're going to be monitoring on a regular basis. And you can reach out to any of us that we're speaking in today's webinar for more targeted questions and for more targeted pieces of feedback. But it's either the smiley face or sending us an email, or if it's specific to data sets, filling out that data request form. So we would love input from you through any or all of those channels.
Great. So there's also been a number of questions on what is the spatial scale of data and PREP. So maybe Emily, you could talk a little bit about the spatial scale and where to find spatial scale information of data on PREP. And then Loretta, you could talk to a little bit about what spatial scale we're working on and look to work on in the future.
Sure. So we've got about a 50-50 split between global data sets and data sets that are focused on the US at this moment. But those all, I mean, each one has a different spatial scale and spatial resolution. So that data for each of the data sets can be found on that dataset detail page, which is that metadata page. And there is a field for each data set that lists the spatial resolution for it. For some of those bigger climate data sets that I was demoing, like the NASA Next GDP, the spatial resolution is 25 kilometers. For the LOGA data set, it's downscaled to 6 kilometers. So, but each of those, all that information is available on those metadata pages.
Right. And to the other question about appropriate scale of applications, so as Emily mentions, the climate data is not bad for climate data at 25-kilometer resolution global and 6-kilometer resolution for the US. The data on population and infrastructure are often much more detailed than the climate data. So I think they're appropriate for regional, state level, and small country applications, let's say. As we're beginning to engage in the 2 states in India, even the global data in PREPdata are useful at that scale. We are improving upon the data for those 2 states to use even higher resolution data. But if you're looking at agriculture across a landscape, water flow basins across a landscape, PREP has reasonably good resolution data for those applications. If one wants to zoom in on a city and look at municipal level flooding issues, some of the data on flooding are adequate, some is quite coarse scale. So without additional data, it would be hard to do detailed city level applications at this point.
Thanks, Loretta. So there's some questions on who is in charge of the data prioritization and how often will different data sets be updated? Loretta, could you speak to that?
Who is in charge? It's a partnership. No one is in charge. Laura and Emily and I work to herd the cats, but no one's really in charge. So we'll be consolidating that input. We'll be taking it to the partnership. It's often the working groups. So in the case of data prioritization, it would be the technical working group that reviews and makes recommendations on what should be included next. And of course, we're going to be balancing demand for certain data sets with the ease of acquiring and uploading them to PREP. So we will keep track of all requests, we'll keep track of the popularity of all requests, and we will respond, both to the demand and to how easy or complicated acquiring data is, but we'll keep track of those requests.
Great.
Emily, do you have anything to add about how we will approach this?
No, I think you essentially covered it. Just that we'll monitor requests on a regular basis and reach out to our partners to help evaluate that and to look at the usefulness of the data as compared to other climate literature that's out there and what other data sets that users have requested. So, yeah.
Thanks. Loretta, what does becoming a PREP partner entail and what are the key benefits?
To become a PREP partner, you apply, and there's a button on the bottom of the About section of the PREPdata website where you can make your initial request. You say who you are, what your organization is, what your interest in PREP is. That's then brought to what's called the leadership team within PREP for consideration. And for any well-intentioned application, they tend to clear and become members. And I should mention, members can join at different levels. And that's not a financial commitment like National Public Radio. It's a sort of time and engagement commitment. Currently, there are 2 core partners in PREP. Those are Future Earth and WRI. Most partners are contributing partners, so they participate in working groups and quarterly partner meetings. And there's also resource partners that want to be a part of PREP, but mostly make available to us their networks for either communicating outward, to the network or soliciting input from the network. The benefits are collaboration within an engaged and interesting and diverse group of people, all trying to make it easier for people to do climate resilience planning. So it's intellectually stimulating. There are many challenges. So, you know, we have to think hard about lots of things to figure out how to resolve them. And we work hard to be aware of the other elements, groups, platforms, and tools within the resilience ecosystem. And we try very hard to not reinvent the wheel. We are leveraging existing platforms and tools that are brought to us by our partners. So it's a great forum for exchange and learning a lot about what's going on in the resilience ecosystem.
Great. I think we have time for one final short question, and then Loretta, I'll turn it to you for some closing words. But first, Francis, can the platform synchronize with stations that measure rainfall, humidity, etc.?
Depends on the data source, but yes, in theory, we can synchronize data with a number of different types of data services. I mentioned a couple of them before, but essentially, if the data is out there, let us know, and you'd like to see it on PREP, and we'll evaluate how best to bring it in, whether it's in near real time or if it's sort of via bulk upload.
Thanks, Francis. Loretta, could you give some closing words and some advice on how people can engage with PREP going forward?
Thank you much, Laura. Very nice job fielding questions and moderating the discussion. I feel this has been a really good webinar. And one of the indicators I'm paying attention to is how many people logged into the webinar and how many people are still online 90 minutes in. So this is great that there's been this much interest and this much engagement on question and answers. So the things to do now would be, please provide feedback through the questionnaire that will be sent out shortly. And please use the platform, test it out, develop dashboards, share ideas about applications you'd like to do or dashboards you'd like to develop. We want to keep track of those, and we're happy to help out. We're happy to collaborate on things. But the other thing is to provide feedback on the platform and the data requests, as we've been discussing throughout this Q&A. And if you're interested, I mean, that's great. Just being a PREP user is a fine thing to be, and submit and interact through PREPdata. But if you want to become more engaged, then do submit the request to be considered as a PREP partner. We would be happy to grow the partnership, and we look forward to hearing from you. And there are so many ways to provide feedback, as Emily pointed out. So let's call it a webinar. This has been recorded, so you can, once you have the link, share it with friends and colleagues that weren't able to participate today, and ask them to also provide feedback. Thanks a lot for your attention, and thanks much to the whole PREP crew for putting this together and doing a fine demonstration. Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye-bye.